On November 9, 1938, the Nazis began orchestrating a wave of violence targeting Jewish communities. Synagogues were firebombed and destroyed, Jewish shops were attacked and looted, and people were ambushed in their homes. And this is the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne in the early hours of this morning, set alight and firebombed by arsonists in what has been described as a deliberate attack on the eve of the Sabbath. 2 people were inside at the time. Lucky they managed to escape with only minor injuries after running for their lives. Except, of course, this is not the Holocaust. This is 2024 in Australia. In the middle of a city, Jews have been set upon. And the worst fears of many in the Jewish community have been realised today, because it's happened again. How did we get here 86 years later at a place of worship, a place where Jews should feel safe, let alone in a country where Jews should feel safe? Have a listen to this frustration from a Jewish man who questioned Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen.
Let's stop with the politics and let's get a short, sharp, straight answer. Have you lost control? Have you lost control, yes or no?
I will take advice from Victoria Police. I will take the advice from the Victoria Police and the Chief Commissioner, who advises me that in terms of acts of violence, they have the tools and the powers to investigate and prosecute people.
Well, the simple answer is yes. Governments have lost control at both a state and federal level. And this sits squarely at the feet of Labor, who have sold out our values for votes. We in Australia live among many different faiths and largely in harmony, as we should, and showing tolerance for opposing views and religions. But that tolerance was shattered on October 7, 2023. Jews don't feel safe in their own country now, because authorities have shrugged their shoulders for 13 months. Peter Dutton, though, understands what has happened here.
It's absolutely abhorrent to see any place of worship attacked. I want to pretend that this wasn't expected or that it couldn't be predicted, but I can't do that to the Australian people. We have seen the rise of anti-Semitism in our community since October 7 of last year.
Now, contrast this with the Prime Minister speaking today about the attack.
This was a shocking incident. Should be unequivocally condemned. There's no place in Australia for an outrage such as this. To attack a place of worship is an attack on Australian values. To attack a synagogue is an act of anti-Semitism.
OK, yes, he's condemned it. Yes, he's called it anti-Semitism. But what has he done since October 7 to stamp out anti-Semitism? Nothing. He's done nothing other than be weak and cower and show no leadership. Labor's moral clarity has been snapped, driven by nothing more than Muslim votes in southwest Sydney seats, even going as far as attacking Israel on the world stage at the United Nations this week in calling for a Palestinian state. And through that, it has abandoned the Jewish community at home and emboldened those who seek them harm. And here we are today with a Holocaust-esque attack on a synagogue. That's why it's so arrogant of the Prime Minister to then say this.
Anti-Semitism is something that has been around for a long period of time, of course. But anti-Semitism has been on the rise. We call it out wherever we see it. We've appointed and I spoke with Gillian Siegel, our anti-Semitism envoy.
Well, hang on a second. 2 points. 1, Labor not only appointed an anti-Semitism envoy, they also appointed a special envoy to combat Islamophobia in Australia, when only one of those is happening right now. And secondly, let's not forget how anti-Semitism actually started in this country. It started on October 9, 2 days after the slaughter of 1,200 Jews in Israel, where women were raped, people were tortured and hostages were taken by Hamas, when we saw this on the steps of the Sydney Opera House, where Gas the Jews became suddenly a point of contention and police claimed, oh no, it was just, where are the Jews? At the same time, Hamas's rampage was celebrated by those who walk among us. And what happened after that? What did Labor do? Police? Authorities? Anyone? Nothing. Nothing at all. And from that moment, our moral fibres in this country disintegrated, and that is when anti-Semitism started, because authorities cowered. No arrests were made. Labor shrivelled, and anti-Semitism exploded. It's become normalised, and that in itself is frightening. It's become a notion of, oh, a little bit is even okay. And it keeps going. Hezbollah flags were waved so blatantly in the streets. A few weeks ago, a car was set alight and others sprayed with anti-Semitic slogans in Sydney. Week in, week out, we see pro-Palestine protests in capital cities. Sydney's Great Synagogue was forced into lockdown 2 days ago because of one of them. And who was moved on by police? Not the protesters, no arrests were made there, but a Jewish man waving an Israel flag was ordered to leave the area. And where has all this led to? Have a listen to this.
I've heard from many, many people within the Jewish community that, quite frankly, don't go into the CBD on a Sunday. Or if they do, they will take their skull cap off. They will de-identify as Jews for fear that if they wear this in the central business district, they are at risk of being a target.
Terrible. It starts with Jews, but it never ends with Jews. Think about that. And this attack today proves it's getting worse. When has Albo ever stood up and said, Hamas release the hostages in the strongest of terms? When has he demanded Hamas stop attacking Israel? The first time we heard real leadership was days ago when Donald Trump said, please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East, and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity. And Donald Trump hasn't even been sworn in yet, and already this is a man who is showing strength and leadership on the world stage that no other leader is willing to do. And then the ultimate betrayal of Israel came this week when Penny Wong voted with the UN for Palestinian statehood, rewarding terror, emboldening terrorists and selling out our values. Because Hamas only wants one state, its own state, so it can wipe out Israel. And no wonder Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement saying Australia's flip-flopping is disappointing, awarding anti-Semitism and terrorism with a state in the heart of the Jewish ancient homeland and cradle of civilization will invite more terrorism and more anti-Semitic riots at campuses and city centres, including in Australia. Thankfully, our key allies support Israel as we strive for true peace and security. In other words, Australia's long-standing relationship with Israel has cracked, and we are an essential ally with Israel, and it's now on tenterhooks thanks to Labor. And it all falls on the Prime Minister, who said he would adopt a bipartisan position on this issue, then threw it back in the face of Australian Jews at the United Nations. And here was the Prime Minister on that today.
Well, 157 countries voted for that resolution, including the Five Eyes partners, the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, as well as Australia, as well as people we work closely with, Germany, Italy, other countries in our region.
So, where is his moral compass? Just because other countries voted for it doesn't mean we have to. He is the leader of this country. There is no moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas because Hamas started this war on October 7. And the sooner Albanese and Wong realise that Israel is not the one standing in the way of peace, the sooner anti-Semitism will stop. The synagogue attack has the Jewish community now asking, well, what happens next? 86 years ago, we know what happened next. Sadly, history is repeating itself in Australia. And isn't it a blight on Labor?